This initiative, Downtown Discussions, is a way for us as a news organization to extend our hyper-local coverage into something that's much more active in the community. It's a way that we can engage downtown students and the community that surrounds us, because that is the whole purpose of our publication, is to serve that dual audience, the intersection, and bring each one closer to one another. This semester, our theme is arts and culture, which is obviously extremely central to downtown Phoenix's development, and many would argue that it's the reason why there is development in downtown Phoenix in the first place. And then also for tonight's discussion, we're talking about arts and gentrification. As artists seek affordable space to own their craft, they often end up fixing up space as they go. Over time, though, when they fix up this kind of property, the values can rise concurrently, and very often artists end up being priced out of those communities. We've seen it all over cities like New York, where artists enforce neighborhood to neighborhood. And the reason why we feel this issue is so critical to downtown Phoenix specifically is because there's only one shot here, basically. There aren't, a variety of neighborhoods that have the kind of commercial building stock to, accommodate artists and, lower value development in Phoenix. So, without further ado, or actually first, we'd like to invite you to participate via DD chat on Twitter, just hashtag it, and we have the Twitter handles for 3 of our 4 panelists up there, so you can talk to them, tweet at them. And at the last 15 minutes of the discussion, we'll have questions from the audience. We'll have someone going around with a microphone to take care of that. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists, just going from nearest to me down. So first we have Kim Moody, who is the founder of the Allen House Arts Project in the Garfield neighborhood. He's also very involved in the Garfield organization. Next up, we have Sloan McFarland, who is the principal of Martha and Mary. They're responsible for such developments as Lux and Ponte Bianco and Vulcan Diner, and he's currently working on the Yorland development at 16th Street and Buckeye. Then we have Kimber Landing, who is the founder and director of Local First Arizona, the owner of Modified Arts, and the founder and owner of Stinkweed's Record Shop. And last but not least, we have Eric Brown, who was the owner of Artisan Homes and now is an employee of the architecture firm who designed many of the artisan projects throughout downtown Phoenix. Most notably, there's the Artisan Village that's on Roosevelt Street between 5th and 7th that includes the workspaces. So for our first question, this one is going to be the only question directed at all of our panelists, so if you could just go down the line and answer this. What is the most important factor in creating and sustaining an inclusive community, economically speaking?
Can you repeat that?
Oh yes, absolutely. What is the most important factor in creating and sustaining an inclusive community, economically speaking?
Well, I'd start with what you've got to start with. Meaning to say, to use my reference, Garfield neighborhood, those of you that don't know, we're just on the other side of 7th Street. What we started with was a deteriorating, disinvested neighborhood, a lot of vacancies, a lot of empty spaces, and what we developed over the period was not, let me make sure I'm not going in another direction here.
Just an inclusive economic community where everyone can afford and be included. What's most important?
Okay, is that disinvestment. Those who had their homes, who had bought their homes, and this goes to today as well, those who had bought shops along Roosevelt Road, those who own the properties are the ones that are going to be able to enjoy the expansion. Those who have not, and in our case as a neighborhood, we're a lower, mid to low income neighborhood, is that there's a situation where if they haven't owned that property, the outside investors are the ones that are going to be capitalizing. For us as a neighborhood, what we are interested in is encouraging single-family home ownership, as well as encouraging the art district overlay. So that is an inclusive role in the sense that we're trying to engage the arts in improving, as well as those who are residents, be able to help them own their homes versus just rent. So that's, we're kind of riding a camel with 2 homes. And one is the investing in new homes, for restored homes for people to be able to live there. as well as the people that want to have businesses in the neighborhood to be able to encourage those investments.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a great question. I think, at least from my experience, opportunity itself is kind of the thing that drives it, and people themselves. So I've kind of found that when those two things collide, then some kind of neat things can happen. So much of it is, there's economic components, but a lot of it is creative capital, and that kind of has a treasure trove of inclusivity kind of built into it.
I believe that there's a lot of different layers of inclusive behaviors that can lead to affordability, and so one of those is events. And I think continuing to have free events at all different levels that include a wide variety of people from diverse backgrounds. So that could be everything from being able to participate in community gardens to First Friday to showing movies in the park for free. Anything that we can do that makes sure to continue to rightfully engage all different sectors of the community will ultimately lead to a more diverse and varied community on every level.
That's a great question, and we could spend hours because there's so many different factors. First of all, an area to be successful has to be vibrant, and it does need to be inclusive, and it has to be sustainable. By sustainable, I mean economically, because not that we don't want to be green and all that. What I'm trying to have you understand is that areas, whether it's New York City, whether it's Phoenix, areas go through huge cycles. Boroughs, Harlem. My wife was just back about 2 months ago, and she's from Northern Ireland, had never been there. She had these impressions, she had no idea what was going on there. But things go in a full circle, and when I came to Phoenix in '78, you didn't come to downtown. There was nothing going on. When I decided to start developing in '98, it wasn't for you, there wasn't, and there really wasn't a lot going on of people trying. But what I wanted to let you understand is if it doesn't make economic sense, you can't do it. You have to have a middle class because they're the ones that are going to put their roots down, spend the money, support the places. When you have very, very affordable, we need to support them, and they don't have disposable income, but we need to help them. Then when we have the very upper end, the problem is they're going to go over to the Biltmore, they're going to travel to other places, and they don't really take it. The reason I try to do middle-priced housing, 135,000 to like 300,000, is that those are people that are vested, and then they get to know their dry cleaners, and they get to know their restaurants, and people know them, and they feel like they're part of the fabric, and they want their friends to visit it. So you have to have something for everyone, and that's a hard balance to keep over time. Things ebb and flow, recessions happen, and booms happen, and greed happens, and all of that. So I'm going to say it's a balance, it's having a vibrant area, and being able to have something for everyone.
Now we're going to go to our individual questions. They're going to be started with one person, but then all the other panelists are welcome to jump in at any time if they feel like they have something to add. First, this is going to go to Eric. We talk about Phoenix as just being in this process of sort of cleaning up, starting to have more investment in the community, things like that. At what point of the gentrification process do you think we're currently in?
Well, we've just finished a huge boom cycle. Well, we had the boom cycle followed by this huge recession, and compared to most of the country, from a housing standpoint, it was a depression. And where downtown Phoenix is, I came back, and if you don't know, after I sold Arthouse Homes, I eventually moved to the Caribbean and bought a restaurant in St. Martin. I mean, I really dropped out. And when I came back, I was like, wow, I can't even believe even during this downturn how many things had happened, how many things were built. I think ASU is probably the number one thing that got us through that recession. I mean, if it wasn't for the students going to the shops and the stores, we probably would have seen a terrible time. And you look at all the projects that failed. So now we are all feeling like we're coming out, and there's a lot of concern that prices are going up very fast. There's a lot of cash that has been on the sidelines. Will they kill the golden goose? Are they going to try to do too much too fast? We need to be focused here downtown on areas to feed off of each other instead of being a hodgepodge. So I guess the answer, after all of that, is I'm so encouraged. I'm so encouraged by what I see with the light rail. I'm so encouraged by some of the bigger projects, but I'm so encouraged that the passion for the Arts District it's been as strong as ever. I still see it. I mean, whether it's the first Fridays or just, it's just the vibe that I still see down there. And you'll know better than I do, but at least from my standpoint, this could be a good cycle if we don't blow it. If we don't see prices go up and try to go too high a price.
I'm also very optimistic, and I think that part of what makes Phoenix distinctly different than New York City is still affordability. And that might be difficult for college students to understand, but if you take it in the national context, for example, I'm in a coalition of record stores across the country, and there's only 2 of us that have been able to afford to buy our own buildings. So my colleague in Seattle looks at my building and looks at the building he rents and says it would be $1.2 million for him to buy his building. And that's hard for me to wrap my mind around, having grown up and been in Phoenix my whole life. But one thing that really separates us is the fact that there are so many owners in the Arts District. It started with this gentleman on the end here. We have owners that have been able to get in there, and we've been able to draw a line and protect those older neighborhoods that are right in that area. We haven't protected all of them, but we've done a pretty good job of linking arms and protecting properties. And because there are so many owners that are in for the long haul rather than the short-term investment, it's made a real difference, and it's helped keep things affordable. Just as a microcosm of that, the fact that I bought and modified long enough ago, I can still do events in there for a relatively, actually a really small amount of money that allows the musicians and the artists to make enough profit to go and do what they need to do. So it keeps the cost down, right on down the line.
As a corollary to that, I want to hear from you, King, so usually the property ownership, you said in your intro, is that the key thing to making sure that we don't price out our artists, that we maintain an affordable community in Phoenix and downtown? Yeah, sorry.
Actually, we are very excited because we've been active in Garfield. There's a cadre of folks that have been sticking around, as Kim points out, that there is people that have bought their homes, and we just have coalitions with Neighborhood Housing Services of Phoenix, which builds affordable or restores old homes. And they just put up for sale, and it's still open, a $47,000 house that if you own 10 years, you'll get $15,000 back. It's been totally restored. It's one of those old houses that you look at and, oh, that was once upon a time and built as a church. Now it's a home. Alice's Restaurant all over again. The investment of people buying their homes now it's key to people that want to get in now and get their little bungalow if they have the ability or the means, or know that they're going to be staying in the valley. We understand students have a tenuous where you're going to go next type situation. It's the same with a lot of artists, I might point out. But it's the opportunity is there now, and the investment is something that if you can do it, it's an excellent time to do it. And it's been that way for a long time, even after the crash, people were able to purchase homes and revitalize them. As a neighborhood, we keep a very balanced position on making sure that we're not pushing people out. And it's our place. I mean, I had the fortune of being born in that neighborhood, so actually not too far from here, the old St. Joe, and been there since returned in 1971. It's always been an open and vital area. Garfield is only one. There's many other little neighborhood nooks and crannies around. The arts don't need to push it out. The university might be in a position of actually doing more pushing out then it might be recognized, just FYI.
One thing that you just mentioned, Kim, was neighborhood housing services and things like that. I'd like to just one to Eric. What do you think about having those kind of public-private partnerships as far as housing? Is that an important thing that you would look for as a developer, or?
I never did, other than there were some requests for proposals, RFPs for land uses, and on one piece of land, I did participate with the city where they helped acquire the land and then we paid them back, plus anything over 10%, which is not a lot in the real estate terms, we split with the city 50-50. So it was a win-win. But normally, I'm the type that doesn't have the patience to do those type of things. I just build. And while everyone else was, talking about all these projects that they were going to do, they didn't. Now when it comes to affordable housing, you pretty much have to have it. But what frustrates me to no end is the amount of fluff that goes into those deals. And it cost how much to build this? And I think about what I did without any assistance, and we could start from 135 or 155, depending on the project. And so for some people it's great. But again, you're trying to create housing, and whether it's rental, and we haven't talked about that yet, but rental's important, because not everyone wants to buy because they don't know how long they're going to be there. Now they've been burned, or they've heard about their parents being burned, and they're not ready to get in. So we have to have good quality rental housing and unique types of housing, because not everyone wants to live in a big apartment building. You want more boutique places and renovated places. And so you have to have this wide variety, and you have to find the right developers that want to do these things. Usually in these downtowns, it has been very, very passionate locals until the very end of the boom when it was too late. And then we had everyone coming in who thought that they were a developer and killed it. Oops, was that my outside voice? Tough crowd here.
Well, I wouldn't mind jumping in on that too. I think home ownership is certainly one kind of piece of the puzzle, or building ownership, but I think just space use. Not only are buildings less expensive in other markets, but also rent is, or use of space. And I remember just when I got out of school and started making art, there were some guys that actually went to issues. This was like 98, 97. And they just rented a building and lived there. It was $500. They both lived there and had a gallery. Kind of made it a living space. It's where Red Modern has their storage space on 13th and McDowell. But it was a fantastic space that incubated, dozens of artists, and incubated a whole group of people that ended up, going into the museum, kind of in the museum world, and creating careers and buying buildings and doing this and doing that. So I think Phoenix has an amazing stock of opportunity in many ways, not just ownership.
Next question I have is for, for Sloan. When you talk about having those kinds of, home ownership and having people, but then also having the opportunity for rentals and things like that, is the development, a lot right now is student housing. That's what basically a lot of people are calling the Roosevelt Point development, things like that. Is the development of more student housing pushing out artists or other community demographics? Does the opportunity of working with students help or hinder the development of the arts community?
Yeah, I think Eric was talking earlier about cycles of development, and he was using the example of Harlem, and I'm kind of of the opinion that there's so many buildings that need to be renovated. I really, I think that I'm always really driven by opportunity of things that maybe weren't discovered before, or maybe that can be polished up and have a certain advantage of discovery that maybe didn't exist before, or wouldn't have existed if someone had found the space before. So I think there's I think this idea of balance is really important. I think there's a certain stability that comes with a low gentrification. I think if you have ownership mixed with use of empty lots that haven't been built on, and suddenly they're built for student housing.
And that was one of the, what do they call it, unintended consequences of our stopping Cardinal Stadium from being built at Roosevelt and 7th Street. Now that that was taken back, that was a done deal, by the way, at the time. Many of our artist organizations and neighborhood downtown associations banded together and stopped the stadium from being built there. As a neighborhood, TJ now has replaced that because there's big interest in crossing 7th Street, not only for parking, but for student living, and as well as for future research, which is going to be built along, I understand, along Van Buren. We're talking 15 and 20-story buildings there. One of the things that we've always been fighting in Garfield neighborhood and advocating is that the housing stock is our housing stock. It's our neighborhood. We were there first. And like any borough, well, actually, this is we're nowhere near boroughs. I'm thinking more like in LA, where you'll have your little lakes and areas where people will gather and they create their neighborhood. And Center City comes, oh, they'll build over there. Okay, well, that's fine. In our historic neighborhood downtown, one of the nice things that we are able to do is be able to keep that balance, work on keeping that balance. It's never a done deal, folks. Keeping that balance between the ability of people being able to rent, buy, and particularly live in, make that commitment for living in the neighborhood, and be able to give back to that neighborhood by just being able to raise their family, by being able to have their garden. We have community gardens, we have youth groups, we have an active park. We have a big, nice little network of social. We have a youth hostel there. This is the kind of vitality that's percolating. Food. Awesome food. Welcome Diner. You guys gotta check that one out. That's just on the street on Roosevelt. But that's the kind of thing that, as a neighborhood, we can stand and say, hey, you can live there, you can work there, you can rent there. It's something that we're going to keep working on, maintaining that ability to keep the housing stock there. It's a historic neighborhood. We're not giving up no more than we should expect in Canto neighborhood to say, okay, we want to build high-rise over here. You can imagine the stink that the rich folks would say when their home is threatened. So us poor folk can raise just as much rabble, and we've been successful in maintaining our integrity of the neighborhood.
I was just going to add real fast, and that's one of the neat things about Phoenix. I mean, I think we have one of the tougher parts about Phoenix is it's such a real estate town, and it's such about growing out. But it also adds a level of kind of consciousness that there's this thing called real estate, and you can own it and buy it. And I mean, not only real estate, but specifically residential real estate. Our economy is so tied to that. So there's, in Garfield, just the vibrancy that I've witnessed over the last 10 years, which is pretty new, considering how long you've been watching it. But when we first opened the diner almost 10 years ago, I really thought the gentrification would be beginning right then. But it really hasn't been until the last kind of 3 years that it is crazy. People are on bikes, people are just owning houses, doing gardens. I mean, it's just, it's very, very, there's a sense not of just being able to grab a place that's inexpensive, which is certainly a big part of Garfield and it's an awesome part of Garfield. There's also a sense of, hey, if you want to stick around, if you want this to be, a spot that you're invested in, it's possible. So it's a really neat vibe. It's very tangible.
Well, and I have to chime in too, and sorry that we're kind of going free for it, but this is something that I've always been interested in is when I started developing downtown, after the first one actually was on Osborne and 9th Street, Artisan Lofts there, across from the Country Club. That was before light rail was approved, and there was really nothing going on yet here. And the Roosevelt District asked me to come over to their area, and they put on their own dog and pony show to try to attract other developers like myself to come there. And I thought it was wonderful. And by the way, that kind of a grassroots thing, it really will work. Whatever you want, just like the stadium. It goes on and on. Now here's the problem. We have all those people that were here first, right? But then we also, as newcomers, we want to be proud of our downtown. You know, the problem when you talk about Phoenix to outsiders, what are they really talking about? Scottsdale, the desert, the Grand Canyon. They just group all of that in. They're not talking about downtown. And you have to have that balance, and Kimber knows this better than anyone, when you don't need another Des Moines, Iowa Hard Rock Cafe t-shirt. You want the Welcome Diner t-shirt. Get some t-shirts. Or if you're yeah. But I mean, you want something that's local. You want something that is yours, that you possess. You want to bring people to those places. We never had a lakefront, waterfront, on the edge of mountains, ocean front. We never had that thing. It just sort of happened here. And so you have to create a there. And so there's going to be this balance. You're going to have those that have been here forever and are going to fight to keep what they had. But on the other hand, we also want new services, facilities, opportunities. And the one thing that I love is the entrepreneurship here. And like you said, because of affordability, I mean, you don't have these opportunities in most other cities. But look at how many restaurants have come and gone that really had passion, that really cared. And it's just, whether it was the business side or it was a little too early or whatever the issue was, but it keeps coming back. And every time it comes back a little stronger, and it comes back a little stronger, and a little stronger. That's where I say, I see this great opportunity, but creating the balance that everyone's happy with is always going to be an issue. Always.
The question that I'm seeing on Twitter is talking about density versus art, because obviously in increasing density, that generally means new construction, and that generally means raising the property values. I guess we'll start with Kimber on this one. Are those two things mutually exclusive? How do you accommodate both of those and maintain affordability in a neighborhood?
Well, it sort of plays into what I said before. No, I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all. There's a lot of properties down there that are already owned, and to participate in those, whether it be renting or otherwise, they're still very affordable. Even though we have 8-story apartments going in across the way, you still got tons of buildings in that neighborhood that are available and totally affordable. There may be a time when they go up, but relatively speaking, I think they're still going to remain affordable for quite some time. So I mean, sure, there's some things that are going to keep pushing and encroaching, but I just don't see I mean, I look out at this city and I see tons and tons of opportunity. Empty buildings and opportunity. And so I think we're going to see that, but I just don't think that is something that there's going to be this immediate, those buildings go up and suddenly I can't show my art anywhere. I just don't think there's that technology there.
I would think Roosevelt Road, one of the biggest things they would love is to see 700 Roosevelt Rows. I mean, there's the building stock, I think, is so huge. We have a whole city that was, built for 50 years that's empty.
The whole area that you just referenced on McDowell, every time I drive by there, I think, why aren't these things being snapped up with the cool little storefronts? And there's so much opportunity there to rent or buy, either one.
Now, and one part of that question, though, is how can you build something new that the artist community would want? Because it's kind of expensive, and that means the rents are going to be expensive. When you build new, it costs more. And that's a tough balance. Artisan Village there's a whole story that I won't bore you with tonight, but why and how, and there's things that I would have loved to have changed, but this is before the boom. By the time I was designing that, nothing had really taken off. As a matter of fact, we were worried about it dropping again. But what I do love is that I wanted to have a place. I remember going to Philadelphia, and I bought a deli sandwich once, and I could see the people living upstairs. And I just thought that was so cool, and so I researched more about live work, and that was an incubator space. And remember when it first started, I can't think, the guys that ended up in the Biltmore with their store. House. Yeah. That was a great success. At the time, it seemed like it was going to be this great success story. They got it started there, and then they went all the way to the Biltmore, and that was a great thing. And Tammy Coe has been a poster child. I bet she's probably done more dollars per square foot than any store ever because of her catering. But that's, it was a storefront, and I love the printers. I like their story, and it just goes on and on. Mojo Music started there. It was a vision of an attorney that wanted to have a guitar studio. But it's hard to, my point was it's very hard to develop that new and make it something that someone would want. And that is an artist that needs room, that needs space. And that's why the opportunities to redevelop these older buildings are something that you just don't see in many places.
As a sort of, oh, I lost train of thought, sorry. I guess the next question is going to be, start with Kim on this one. When we talk about this sort of, gentrification process and those sorts of things, that would, that investment of capital seems like something that could be very easily leveraged for an arts community as far as, investing in, especially like a nonprofit space like yours is. So is there a way that artists can use this gentrification process to their advantage to leverage business partnerships? Would this accommodate commercial arts endeavors or just nonprofits?
It would be ideal that both be able to be generated with LLCs and activities like that, where you share common goals. There might be examples where, think of any, but you probably know several, Kim, where there is a nonprofit, but there is also a for-profit activity that's associated with it. In our case, we do events, and those special events with their liquor licenses, does that ring a bell? Ding, 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 cash. That helps to facilitate a business activity. It generates more income than, say, a sale of a painting. A painting will, the majority of that goes to the artist, so that's the wonderful part of being able to give that artist exposure. But as far as the nonprofit facility, it's a little one. So there's always an openness, a willingness, and a challenge, at the same time, to be able to marry business with fine art and with community. You were mentioning, Eric, about the difficulty of building a nonprofit, building affordable housing and making it a return. It's just not likely to be able to be done because of the government grants that are being given to the federal and state grants of LISC and these various other corporations that fund and underwrite and underpin the redevelopment of affordable housing. That's a buzzword, affordable housing. And most students would fit within that low-mod structure. And when you have people like we were just speaking of, the NeighborWorks neighborhood housing, they're a nonprofit, and they would be able to qualify most anyone that would show that they have an ability to maintain the income that they're at right now, and not just a student loan that you're going to have to pay back. But if you can show that, it's like an amazing opportunity right now as a nonprofit to be able to go to that and get it. As far as business, it's a challenge. It's out of my league, and I would defer to Eric and Kimber on that, and Sloan.
I guess then any of you who want to attack that, I mean, what the example that I think of immediately as far as leveraging that for like a for-profit model would be something similar to what like Ted Decker's doing with his use of sponsorships and stuff to fund artists. I guess Kimber, I'll start with you. What do you think?
Sure, yeah, no, that's a great example and a great model, and there's a lot of that going on. But I also think there really is something to say about getting building owners that believe in the arts community. We happen to have 6 on Roosevelt Row artists who bought buildings, and we all are keeping the prices down to make it accessible to artists of all kinds. And I really can't underscore enough, that really separates us apart. I'm looking at Michael sitting right here. He happened to be in a building that was not owned by an artist or who valued what he did with his gallery, and he lost it. That is a shame beyond belief, but luckily there are still quite a few that are affordable and that are being rented out by artists in the community. But you're not going to see that in a place like New York. You're just not. You're going to see investors who own properties and artists who are lucky if they can find a place to rent.
I would like to jump in, since we've been mentioning New York and the big cities, which were number 5 after all. There's a 6. Anyway, we have folks that come in for our activities that are from New York and San Francisco and so forth, and they look at our facility, which is at 12th Street Roosevelt here in the neighborhood. We're open to about Tuesday through Friday, Wednesdays. We have more space, and I remember going to San Francisco and looking at these really hip little places, and it's like they were all contained within a building. And then, like in New York, you go get a studio, and you go, oh man, I got a studio in New York. Yeah, you want to see the size of it? You want to really try that? I mean, I'm a Westerner. I couldn't conceive of living in a box, so small. But I can assure you that the spaces that we have out here are something that people look and say, how did you get all this yard? Well, that just came with the space. It was built that way in 1912. So that's one of the benefits of looking in historic areas that Phoenix is surrounded by. And that includes some of the, like we were talking about, warehouses and some of the smaller little shops that you see that are for sale. It's amazing the opportunities, you know, you go, well, my buddy over here, and like we were just saying, people get together and oh, here's this idea, let's work together. It doesn't displace the person that's living next door to you. It enhances their life. In the case of artists, they're the ones that are painting up their houses. You would be amazed at well, you can always spot Arthouse. They color it colorfully, right, Michael? And it's one of the things that inspires is the person next to it. It's called broken window syndrome. Some of you study that kind of class work. The broken windows, you fix your window, the next person's going to say, oh, gee, maybe I should fix mine. And your lawn is mowed, maybe I should at least weed mine. But that's the kind of thing that artists bring into a neighborhood that enhances the existing residents and does not push them out.
And I'll just throw a couple of 2 cents on it. And now you remind me of other things, but I want to keep my head over here. The architect that did all of my work, William Hesselholch Architects out of California, who I work with now, we do work all over actually the world, but predominantly in the western U.S. A lot of places like such as in Denver or Santa Ana, where they're Anaheim, where they're trying to do this urban hip. I love all the developers. They really aren't part of it, but they want to try to design something that they think is going to fit. By the way, I was just up in Denver in Broomfield as you're getting up towards Boulder, and there's a live-work community there. And she was from Santa Ana. She said, "Oh, I could finally find something that I could afford. This was only $600,000." Yeah, but wait till you see what it is in Santa Ana. It's very, very hard. But what we have to do is density. And like you're saying, it's a small box. But you try to create something that is livable. And it's just that the developers are going to have to hit a number. What concerns me about Phoenix is, the high-rises that were built. And by the way, if you go back to the 60s, just before I started, I got to meet one of the, and I cannot remember his name, he's no longer with us. He was one of the original developers of some of the residential high-rises. He tells me that there wasn't one that he knows of that made money when it was originally built. That it took down the developer, many times it took down the bank, and sometimes even the second developer. They don't pencil because there's too many units to be absorbed, and by the time you start absorbing those, there's a recession or you're competing with yourself when prices go up. What I'm always concerned about is if the market gets hot, everyone's going to try to raise their prices because it's human nature. There's very few of us, and I include myself in that because, I could have tried to do something more dense and more expensive, but I was trying to do something that I felt fit and at least felt fit better and would get some density down here. We need density for downtown. There is no question. We need a lot more density. It feels so good when I was parking the car and seeing so many ASU students going by. Well, we need to multiply it by about 6, and we need it on 3 blocks down and 4 blocks that way, because then that'll support all the restaurants and all the things you want to come down to. And you want to be the place instead of saying, oh, let's go up to Scottsdale. You're out of town, friends, to go see this. You want to say, come to downtown. Let's see what's down here. Look how cool it is.
All right, well, we're running close to out of time, so I'm going to have one more question. I'm going to start with Kimber on this one. So just as sort of going back to a broader issue, what is the ideal environment for an arts-related small business in a downtown area? Is it a combination? Is it affordability? Is it the character of the neighborhoods around it? Is it density? What's the ideal environment?
It's a combination of a lot of different things. Again, affordability. It's a big piece of it is something I've been working on behind the scenes for almost 8 years now, and that's streamlining the process in building code for adaptive reuse to make it easier for a small business to take an old building and turn it into a new business. That's critically important. The pilot program we created 4 years ago, just to give you an example, saved the first 12 businesses we ushered through 4.5 months and $16,000 a piece in the process to get their doors open. So, a friendly business environment. cooperative neighbors. I also think that part of it is not really just what needs to be there, but rather the energy that the artist or group, the next guy came in, the next guy came in, and we still continue to collaborate and work together. And that inclusive environment and collaborative spirit, I think, has led to the success of the district. Again, it's that linking arms, and that's a big piece of what makes the ideal environment.
You hit it right on the head, and the critical mass is what that creates.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
She said it all. Yeah, that was perfect. That's exactly right. Yeah, when I was talking about the Roosevelt district, you know, actually having their own forum to try to get us downtown, and the whole just the energy of the First Fridays those are the kind of things I think every city has their proponents and their supporters. Phoenix had nothing to work with, man. You know, they didn't get any help from the city. Everyone was into sprawl. There was nobody.
They kept getting stumped and stuff.
Oh, you should say, I don't know if they heard that. That's true. They were stepping on people down here. And it really was something that the grassroots was huge here. And the stadium, you know, a lot of you, if those of you that are students and you weren't around at that time, that was a huge, huge thing. And most people would have said, what do you mean you don't want a stadium downtown? Can you imagine now?
22 stories, right? Was it 22 stories? The equivalent of 22 stories. Giant steel dome over all of that stuff. That was the proposal.
But we're here now, so. Just get more.
Well, it's just, I'm fascinated that you folks are interested in this topic because it's something we live, and as purveyors and looking at and studying and absorbing and learning, we never stop. And believe me, if you stop, you're dead. So keep it going. You know, be curious and be active. Don't be hesitant when the opportunity's in front of you. You'd be amazed how things can open up if you have a clear idea of what you want, your passion, to express it. And inclusivity, you're speaking of. Cultural diversity is the most remarkable fuel to a dynamic, vital city. And that's what we got. We've got some great cultural diversity. We have Puente in our neighborhood. That's our Promise folks, our brothers and sisters. And it's like, to have that kind of vitality and energy just makes a neighborhood sing. Any neighborhood. You'll find whatever neighborhood you're going to be in, there's going to be a house over there that has these eccentric people and probably is painted a little different, or gee, they have some odd sculpture in their front yard. Those are the people to look at as being the seed to the change that makes things better.
With that, we're going to go into audience questions. So if you have something you'd like to contribute, just please raise your hand and ask away. Pete, go ahead.
When I hear the panel talking about local business, inclusive community, and smart growth, the white elephant in the room seems to be a city government that wants to still build huge towers and hire yet another consultant to come up with a master plan, even though the one citizens came up with 5 years ago still has not been implemented in full. So I guess my question is, how does this work when we have a city government that more often than not just doesn't fucking get it?
So I'd like to comment on that. And I know it's probably not a sufficient answer, Pete, but it's that it is changing. And we are, I think, what we're seeing, you know, you left for 2 years and came back and you're like, wow, look at all this stuff that's happened. We're now seeing them simultaneously focus on the big and the small. And forever, since the beginning of time, they weren't focused on the small at all. Small was an insignificant, irrelevant, and only now are they starting to see that the small, you can't just, there is no silver bullet, right? For forevermore, and all the way up to the most recent big development downtown. This was a silver bullet, and then this was a silver bullet. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Arizona Center or Collier Center or any of them, or any of them. But I think that we're finally to a point where our city government is populated with people who understand that it's never going to be one big project. It's going to be a lot of smaller projects. And it isn't perfect, and we're not there, but it is better than we were even just a few years ago. The amount of leverage we've been able to get funded, the Office of Customer Advocacy, the attitude of staff is, you want to open up an art gallery, you want to open up a restaurant in an old house, how can we help you? Whereas even 2 or 3 years ago, it was, oh, this guy. Yeah, this guy's going to take up all of our time, and he's not going to bring in hardly any fees. I mean, and it's really significantly changed, but it's still going to take more time. I wish it was like a light switch, but it really isn't. But it is better. I'm optimistic.
And I have to throw in the other side, because we are an urban city. I mean, we have 5 million people living in the greater area, and not everyone wants the same thing. I'll put it that way. And there's going to be, we lost all of our corporate headquarters here. The places that were from here, that were based here, they all left. And there's not only a sense of pride of having someone that's from here, but having them also in your downtown and being a part of it. If you have to decide what you want to be, but everyone will never agree on what that is. So you have to have pieces for everyone. That's what we said. It has to be something that is accepting to all types. It's just where it goes, i.e. the stadium. That was not the right place. We fight our battles. We're going to win some, we're going to lose some. But overall, if we I was on the Design Review Standards Commission for 9 years and a chairman for a couple of years. And that was tough. You've got a lot of different people. I go to other cities where there's urban Targets, and now unfortunately there's urban Walmarts, and there's urban, they're all creating these new things, and there's, God, you don't really want them. And on the other hand, people say, but I need toilet paper, it's at midnight. There's this balance, and it's very, very hard. So I just say, keep somewhat of an open mind to say, all right, am I achieving 60% of what I want of my downtown? And you're probably doing well, because a lot of places, they don't listen. Never going to be perfect, but I would say, I look at what we have today, compared to what we had a decade ago, it's.
I think part of that too is to look at what's driving that thought process. A lot of that is there's a city budget that people need to pick up trash, they need to pay for parks, they need whatever all those things that we all experience in the micro in our own day-to-day lives. The city of Phoenix is dealing with those issues as well. The best thing that we can do as citizens in this city or any city is to show the dynamic opportunity that we present economically, culturally. I mean, I think there's definitely an element that I noticed around 2005-ish where municipalities finally were starting to understand, hey, there's some real economic upside for us to listen to these artists. There's some real economic upside to listen to how culture turns into economic return, which helps us pay for picking up the trash more. Is it perfect? No. But I think that from my perspective and experience, we all collectively have the same thing. I sense an acknowledgement of that, and not just on a, hey, now I'm an art lover, not that, but more from the numbers guy in the city of Phoenix saying, okay, my job now depends on helping that grow, as opposed to my job depends on getting Phelps Dodge to open up this. So I think with anything, and I'm starting to get, I turn 40 next year, I'm starting to get a little more mellow than I used to be probably, but one of the things I'm trying to do personally is be a little bit better in my understanding of how someone else is thinking and how someone else, what's driving them. And I've kind of found out on a very personal micro level that sometimes that, maybe compassion's too strong of a word, but that mentality kind of gets me in a spot where I'm on their side and they can be on my side, even though maybe we're not aesthetically enjoying the same language per se. But frustration's always there.
I have to throw in one other thing. There's something I always talk about, and that is the soul. The soul is what the city, you know, simple things. A dog park downtown. I know the fight that was going on forever to try to get it. I used to go down to by the library when you'd go to Hans Park, and you know when I lived in LA, and there would be pick up soccer games in these parks, and it'd be great. And they just do trash cans, and that was the goal. And what do we have? We have a damn drainage right in the middle of a big grassy area where everyone's going to turn their ankle over and kill themselves. There was no opportunity for it. And then if you tell them that's what we want, they would say no. That's not what we intended for it. You go to Chicago now. Is anyone old enough to remember when Chicago sucked? I mean, when it was awful? And now, today, how cool is Chicago? It has such a lifeblood. It has a soul again. I mean, so I say we need to fight for the soul all the time. And that's what the arts, the restaurants. Hey, number 77 this year, this ranking for Pizzeria Bianco. I just read that today. Hey, that's better than some cities. At least we have one in the top 100. Those are the kind of things that we need to keep fighting for.
There's another question here. She had her hand up first, I believe, so go.
Okay. One of the things that I think has been semi-touched on, but kind of a little bit more coded, and I think that one of the tweets that was scrolling for a bit kind of addressed questions about racial diversity as well, and so one of the things that I think makes downtown Phoenix different than Scottsdale is more than just the fact that it's in a different location, and the fact that we have an arts culture. That downtown Phoenix has a huge amount of diversity when it comes to. I mean, you mentioned Puente, and mentioned that there's a lot of cultural and financial diversity. I suppose that as we're talking about this idea of keeping affordability, the question that kept kind of going around my head is affordability for who? And so I guess I know we're talking specifically about arts and gentrification, but I think there's a whole aspect of the arts culture that is so connected to the community that I was just curious if anyone would like to speak on that subject, I suppose.
I'm not sure. My experience is that most of the artists, other than the ones that educate and therefore have an income, a steady income, they're not what you would call rich. They're not what you would call even middle income. So the ability for their engagement in investment, I mean, it doesn't mean that just because you're a painter and you sell a few paintings, you probably have some side job on the side, and whatever it is that's helping you make that income, if you find a niche where you can find the space. I think it's been pointed out, and we know it ourselves, if you can get in early, yet you can really benefit, and it doesn't cost you as much later as if you were to invest earlier. That's just from an investment point of view. As from a rental, and that's where the majority of our artists are, they rent and they collaborate and they work together and multi-house and all that. It's the diversity that you were speaking of is one of the things that is really key to making that vital. I mean, how else can you say multi-flavors? If everything were vanilla, it would be a damn boring city in life. Thank God we have chocolate and licorice and all kinds of fun flavors. It's adhering to that diversity and enhancing it. Hey, it's only going to make it better for everyone. Just, I feel like it should not be a situation where people feel pushed, or not feel, where people are being pushed out because the property values are now starting to rise. they're not quite doing that yet. The market is going up, but there are still those little niches, those little places that you, if you're interested, you can invest, you can live, you can even set up a part, with the landlord, you can set up a lease option. So it's like, for a variety of people have done it, a variety of different approaches. I don't feel like we have to feel artists or are over gentrifying a neighborhood because they're just as poor as the poorest folk that are there. So go with it. Let's just encourage everyone to achieve their dream.
There's one of the projects I'm working on is at 16th and Buckeye. It's a little bit outside of the downtown core. It's literally between Sky Harbor and downtown. And one of the things that's been really interesting to watch is it's one of the deepest Hispanic areas historically that Phoenix has, the Golden Gate Barrio. And on the property from 16th Street east was part of really a gut-wrenching kind of a city takeover of that property for expansion for the airport. All the property from 16th Street to 7th Street, and I think it's starting to move into Central a little bit too, has been designated as a repurchase zone because of the sound issues with the airport. Instead of creating a buyout sort of thing where there's a gun at your head saying, we do have the power of eminent domain, we're going to buy that, they created a selective process where if you wanted to sell your house, you could sell it. The interesting thing is, there's a line currently of people that want to sell their homes. Half of them have been sold already, and the other half haven't. So I think I kind of grew up in that area to some degree. I didn't live there, but I was very familiar with it and spent a lot of time in that area. And I've gotten to know people that are in the area and have been there for a long time. And some people find a lot of value there, and some people don't. And to me, that's okay. Like I respect both folks. And I think there's an element for me that I don't want to put on someone that has been living in an area for a long time that necessarily that's something that they want to stay doing for the rest of their lives. I think it's a very movable, mobile situation in terms of how people view where they live or how they want to live. So I don't know. I think that diversity is something that is fluid, is something that should be welcoming, and there's ways of approaching that, I think, in terms of outflow or inflow that changes in many ways just on how it's approached. In like this neighborhood that it went through eminent domain when there was a forced exit. It was more how the action was taken or how it was organized versus the sentiment of the people that were living there. And that's something I've always kind of taken with me in terms of kind of the view of value.
Are you referring to Golden Gate? Are you referring to Golden Gate?
Golden Gate, yeah.
So,
one of the most beautiful stories I've ever heard, by the way, is of any kind of area that's been torn apart or grown or whatever happened in Golden Gate. There was a church there that the neighborhood they decided that was the one building they didn't want torn down, and they had the power to tell the city, no, this is one building that's not going to get torn down. And even, I guess it's 40 years later, every Christmas that community comes to that church and has a Christmas mass there. I mean, I kind of tear up when I think about that. It's one of the most beautiful stories of community I think I've ever heard of. And now they're bringing, it's like standing room only. They're bringing the grandkids. I don't know. I think diversity is so many multiple levels.
So and that goes back to and also to just having having a place that is ours. That all downtowns, all places, everything starting with the caveman with the fire. It was the place you all gathered to. In the home, it's the kitchen. In the neighborhood,
it's obviously a right. It's a right that government has. It's a very, very powerful tool.
Let me give you an example of where that eminent domain affects all of us, and that's right down here where the Bryn Mawr Library is. We talked about the park. That used to be part of our neighborhood. Garfield at Moreland Street. There is now a freeway there, guys, and that just sliced right through our neighborhood. And all of a sudden, the hospital's on the north side, and we're on the south side. All of our best housing stock, which would happen to be right in that pathway, gone. So we now have a lot less positive housing stock as a result of that.
I'm just looking at this diversity tweet up here. This is really important to say this as well. And for anybody that wasn't following what was going on at City Hall today, the LGBT community was simply trying to add themselves to an ordinance protecting them as you can't discriminate against an LGBT community member in the way of firing them from a job or holding them back from a raise, the way we do for any ethnicity or religious belief. And I am horrified to report to you that that was actually a battle at our City Hall today. And I can't underscore this enough. How many of you are students, ASU students, okay? It is so important that you remain engaged and involved, because what happened was the very organized religious right brought thousands of people down to our City Hall to write letters, make calls, and show up today to fight this and to say that the LGBT community members we have actually shouldn't have that protection. And in 4 hours, thankfully, we were able to mobilize and get a lot of people out. But we had council members who were on the fence because they were hearing so much from the anti-group and not enough from the support group. And so I can't tell you enough. I mean, there's some very seriously motivated people in this room who fought the battle for a long time. It's time for a younger generation to take that baton. You have to show up, you have to have your voice be heard, or we're going to end up with a big pile of poo for a city. I can't even imagine the national press having a field day if that vote had gone down today.
it's already bad enough nationally.
And most people are standing around going, huh? What's going on? You have to stay engaged. There is no choice.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. I'm very sorry. But I thank you all so much for coming and talking with us. We still have food, and the panels will be sticking around for a little bit longer. So we encourage you to go up and talk with them, talk with me. Looking ahead, we have 2 more actually panel discussions this semester. The next one is the last Tuesday of March, which will be about design in Phoenix and branding of our culture, and whether that's even